Hope you're having a good Saturday morning, Central Georgia. It's the day that we've been talking about in your forecast for quite some time. We have our weather impact alert for some possible snow showers. Depending on where you live, snow showers are going to be a lot more likely. And also, along with that, we have an extreme cold snap that we are going to be dealing with as we go into Sunday morning and even a little bit into your Sunday afternoon. So we'll go over all the specifics of everything you need to know. So first things first, just to recap, your weather impact alert going to be for possible snow showers. Emphasis on the word possible because it's all going to be dependent on where you live. Now, if you live in northeast central Georgia, you are likely going to see some snow throughout today. However, farther over to the west, down to the southwest, that's where the chances do get a bit iffier and some possible accumulation not looking the best as compared to those areas up to the north and the northeast, but something everyone with certainty, 100% certainty, will be dealing with into tomorrow is a frigid cold snap. We were talking about the coldest air mass of the year moving in as of this past Monday and Tuesday. However, now this one looks to take the cake for the coldest air mass of the winter season so far. We're talking about feels like temperatures not only down in the single digits, but some areas in north central Georgia could flirt with 0 degrees for what that wind chill value is. So your weather impact alert is going to go for all day today because we are looking at the onset of some wintry precipitation here over the next couple of hours, and then it will continue into the first part of your Sunday morning. Then we'll get into Sunday afternoon, and we do anticipate the numbers to get above freezing temperature for a few hours, and hopefully that leads to the melting of anything frozen at the surface. So the weather impacts that we're specifically looking out for are hazardous and slippery road conditions. It is going to be a very cold environment. We have a really good deal of certainty that whatever falls in the way of wintry weather is going to be of the snow variety, and the ground is going to be cold enough to allow for that snow to stick very quickly. So obviously the roads are going to be a hazard, especially with some slick areas, and especially if we start to see some melting and possible refreezing of anything down there at the surface as we go throughout your Sunday. We're still looking at higher totals farther to the east and the northeast here in central Georgia. We'll go over those forecasted totals as of this morning, and your cold weather alerts, those have been issued. That is something we were on the lookout for a little bit earlier back into the work week around Wednesday, say into Thursday. Then we did see an extreme cold watch issued. That has now turned into an extreme cold warning. So meteorologist Ansley will be breaking that down in a bit more detail coming up shortly. But right now, here's a walk around the quad. Beautiful, beautiful start to your Saturday morning. It is also a very chilly environment, but what you can see is nothing in the way of winter weather has gotten going here in central Georgia yet. Downtown Macon is looking nice and sunny, not really much in the way of cloud cover except off to the east. That is going to be the general direction that you actually see this cloud deck, but we're going to have to turn our eyes to the north because that's where there is a bit more of an active picture right now. I'm going to go ahead and go on our Skycams map, and I'm going to pop up a couple where we have seen some snow already early this morning up in northern Georgia, and we'll take a look at that satellite and radar in just one moment. Here is Blue Ridge, Georgia, so you can see a good sheet of white down there on the ground, and it doesn't matter if it's the road, if it's just a general grassy surface, we are seeing that snow stick to everywhere in the ground up here in Blue Ridge, even a couple of flurry showers that we can start to get a pretty good glimpse of. We haven't had the best image here in Blue Ridge all morning because it has been rather dark, but now the sun is beginning to rise, so we have a bit more better visibility. The sky cams that I think we have the best image of what the snow is doing up in northern Georgia are going to be in Dalton, Georgia. So right off I-75, go over to the east of it, and maybe about 30 to 45 minutes south of Chattanooga and about 30 minutes south of the Tennessee state line. So here's Dalton. First takeaway, take a look at the flagpole right here. There are some gusty winds that are continuing to blow that American and Georgia state flag, and the roads are covered in some snow. And you can obviously see some areas where you get a good image of the asphalt, and that's where the cars have driven over that snow early this morning. But it is definitely sticking to the road, something that we did not see as of the last snowmaker just 2 weeks ago in time. The roads were wet, yes, but nothing was frozen, nothing was slick, and that is going to be the main thing that we're on the lookout for throughout today. And then we'll flash it over to this other sky camera up in Dalton. This appears to be at a CarMax, some kind of car dealership, but we can see a good image of those flurries with all of these street lights right here. They're showing that consistent flurries are blowing what I would normally say is left to right, right to left. It is going to depend on where you are relative to the snow, but the snow is coming actually straight at the camera that we do see here, covering all these cars, covering the parking lot, and out here on the road. So you can see folks here out on the roads. I imagine they are taking it a little bit slower than speed limit, especially this car right there, actually heeding some advice that some of your local meteorologists give. So that is very nice to see. But this is up in northern Georgia, still a good about 2 hours away from our neck of the woods. We'll go down to another sky camera and see if we can see anything here. This is actually going to be on Lake Lanier right now, just outside of Gainesville. And we're starting to see a bit more light in the sky, and it looks like we can see something in the way of precipitation, but it's really hard to see if maybe this might be some actual snow right there on the dock, or maybe even seeing some flashes of white on the islands here at Lake Lanier. So once the sun continues to rise, we'll get some better visibility there, but we can go all the way down to, let's say, Marietta, somewhere in Atlanta. Let's see where I can get a good image of the ground. This is going to be downtown Marietta, so just northwest of the metro Atlanta area, and we don't see anything. Not quite accumulating on the ground just yet. We might start to see a couple flurries fall from the sky, and it actually looks like a pretty cool image that we can see with that first light in the sky. But it does look like maybe there are some slick conditions, a little bit of shine on that walkway in downtown Marietta. But nonetheless, the main thing I wanted to show you is that the snow is not got going here as of right now. However, it is going in North Georgia, and we'll show you the satellite and radar coming up in just one moment. Here's a look at your current temperatures. Right there around that magic 32-degree number. We have some areas over to the east and the southeast, which is going to be important because these areas over to the east are looking at some higher snowfall totals throughout today. Somewhere in the low 30s, the mid 30s, 34 in Sandersville, Wrightsville, all the way to Swainsboro. 37, the warmest temperature down in Vidalia, but you can start to spot some 31s, some 30s, even a 29 all the way over in Butler. So believe it or not, our high temperature for today, we have already hit, or we are getting ready to hit as of this morning. These numbers are going to drop throughout today. So as those clusters of some snow showers do creep down from north to south, it's actually going to bring down some colder levels of the atmosphere that are a little bit higher than surface level when that snow does begin to fall. So these numbers are going to dip down into the upper 20s, eventually even the mid 20s as we go into this afternoon. And we're already starting to see an uptick in the breeze. Sustained winds maybe up to 12 miles per hour over in Thomaston. The general consensus right now is farther over to the west and the southwest here in central Georgia. You are holding on to some gustier winds than, say, areas over to the east and the northeast. But take a look at what we're watching right here, the direction of these winds. They're starting to clash, coming in from the northeast up on the top right of your screen, and over here to the left side of your screen, starting to come in from the northwest. But this is indicating that counterclockwise rotation that we're talking about with our low pressure center. Not quite sure if I see the exact center of this low pressure anywhere here in the state of Georgia, but I do anticipate that the low pressure center somewhere to the east and the southeast of us, and it's going to move out into the Atlantic. And the farther that gets away from us, the winds are actually going to get gustier and gustier. So your feels-like temperatures, obviously, we've been showing this graphic just about each and every morning. All it takes is a 5-mile-per-hour breeze to make the feels-like temperatures lower than what your actual temperatures do read. So they are scattered about the 20s and almost everywhere here in central Georgia, with the exception of our eastern counties that are still holding on to some 30s, maybe a 32 in areas like Wrightsville and Vidalia. But that does make sense because where did we take a look at the gusty winds? That was farther over to the west and the southwest. Over to the east, the winds haven't picked up quite as much as of right now. So satellite and radar, if we turn our sky cameras over to the north, you'll see cloud cover approaching from north to south. We also see the edge of that cloud deck off to the east, but nothing in the way of precipitation as of right now. Going up into the northern portion of the state, still having a really hard time picking up on those flurry showers that are in northern Georgia on the actual radar imagery. Now we can go ahead and take away the clouds and you'll see some of these flashes of some blue, but also we have another radar tool that we can use to kind of double check what's actually going on. And we also do have a good amount of gaps in the radar up here in northern Georgia. So maybe there is some snow falling that we're not actually picking up because the mountains can limit some of the visibility according to our radar imagery up in Peachtree City. But here's a look at those snow showers, really up near Dahlonega, going down into the Gainesville area. So I do imagine that sky cam we were looking at in Lake Lanier, it actually is dumping some snow in areas just to the west of Gainesville. Northeastern Georgia, up in Rabun County, the Clayton, Georgia area, getting ready to move down closer to Toccoa and Toccoa Falls. There's that cluster of some wintry weather we saw in Dalton, but still not really picking up on those flurry showers that we just got a current view of. Now right there kind of moving down towards Rome in northwest Georgia and getting up into the northwestern and the northern portion of the metro Atlanta area. I imagine it's not too long before some snow does begin to fall there. So as far as our timing for the snow, what time should you plan to walk outside and maybe start to get a glimpse of some of those flurries? I would say our farthest northern counties. Starting around 8 to 9 a.m., that's going to be the window when we could see that wintry precipitation get started. And it looks like as we go throughout the rest of the late morning time frame, 10 a.m. all the way getting pretty close to lunchtime at this point, that's when we start to see some pockets of some steadier snow creep into north and northeastern Georgia. But you will see a couple of scattered flurry showers over to the west. This latest model run of Future View is really not picking up on the totals that we have seen it as of recently, but it still maintains the same idea that we've had for about 3 days' time now. If you live to the east and northeast in central Georgia, that is where you are going to see higher accumulations and you're going to see the snow for longer this afternoon, as opposed to a couple of flurries back over to the west and down to the southwest. But a good way that I can think about showing you which areas have the greatest snow potential, other than showing you the watches, the advisories, and the warnings, take central Georgia and divide it into a three-piece pie. And those dividends are going to be the interstates. So I-75 going all the way down to the south, and then I-16. So this kind of quadrant up here to the north of I-16 and over to the east of I-75, all this northeastern-most third of central Georgia, that's where your snowfall totals are looking the most likely. If you live down here in this bottom quadrant, not looking as likely, but you still could see some flurries. And I would have the least confidence in snow popping up over to the west of I-75, even though you see a few of those spotty snow showers. But nonetheless, the timing starting mainly in northeast central Georgia going into around the 9 a.m. hour. Continuing to be widespread, maybe even on and off at some points throughout this afternoon, but it will continue for east and northeast central Georgia, where you'll even start to see some darker colors of some blue and purple, and that's going to indicate heavier snowfall rates up here on the legend. And that continues well into the afternoon, maybe even as late as the evening hours right over here closer to the I-16 corridor, our easternmost counties. And then finally, it will begin to move out as we go into the nighttime hours. And eventually that cloud cover is going to clear as well. But something that's not going away will be the winds as we walk out the door on Sunday morning. But typically, when you have clouds present overnight into the early morning hours, it keeps your numbers a little bit warmer than they could be. However, when you get clearing in that cloud cover, it allows the numbers to drop down a little bit more. And a good important note with Future View, we remain clear throughout tomorrow afternoon, which is going to be important. Plenty of sunshine, and our temperatures are forecasted to be above freezing temperature to allow for anything frozen that's sticking at the surface to continue to melt throughout tomorrow afternoon. So here's a look at the same model run, same Future View, just zoomed in and it popped up some temperature plots. Like I mentioned, now into the next hour or so going to be around the time that we hit our actual high temperature for today, because you see once that snow starts to move through, you are going to see numbers get a little bit lower, maybe down to 30, but you will see some numbers still slightly above freezing temperature. That's just a bit of an issue that we have with the graph model in general. It's very reluctant to drop the numbers actually below freezing temperature a lot of times, but by the afternoon, these numbers at freezing temperature for the most part, getting into the upper 20s farther to the north. 5 p.m. This is typically when our warmest portion of the afternoon is going to be. For the most part, we're talking about scattered 20s here in central Georgia, so it does look like these temperatures will continue to cool down as we go throughout the day. And then as we go into the nighttime hours, areas with clear skies, eventually that will be everyone in central Georgia, drops the actual numbers down into the upper half of the teens as you wake up on Sunday. And as we go into the afternoon on Sunday, numbers that are slightly above freezing temperature. I think most areas will actually be closer to the 40-degree mark tomorrow, but there is going to be a good window of some above freezing temperatures throughout tomorrow to allow for the melting. So as far as the specific timing goes, you'll see actually a lot of different shaded boxes here, and we're actually kind of on the second half of this graphic right now. So what I mean by the onset of impacts, what is the earliest portion, timing-wise, that we could start to see something in the form of snow showers? Well, obviously the beginning of our window for northern central Georgia was around the 6 a.m. hour, but I think we're going to find ourselves kind of smack dab in the middle of that time frame. 6 a.m., the starting window of it, all the way to 12 p.m., right there around lunchtime for when the ending of that window will be. And then if you do see any impacts down in south and southwest central Georgia, it's mainly going to be after the noon hour. So northern central Georgia going to see the earliest onset of those impacts a little bit earlier. Like I said, closer to probably around 9 a.m. is when those snow showers should creep in. But areas in north and northwestern Georgia did get an earlier start. Even northwestern Georgia saw impacts maybe as early as the 6 p.m. hour last night. They've been dealing with on and off flurry showers for quite some time up there. But then we get into our winter weather alerts. So we have seen a little bit of fluctuation with this over the last couple of days, but we don't see the watch anymore. We will see the advisory and the warning categories. So speaking of that, meteorologist Ansley Parker joins me this morning to break down the full details about which areas of central Georgia should expect what this weekend. What do you got for us, Ansley?
Another team effort this upcoming weekend. So Alex and I will both be kind of bringing updates throughout the rest of the morning. But like he was saying, we are under some more clear-cut warnings and advisories across our area. So what I wanted to show you quickly, I know Alex showed it to you just a second ago, but I want to emphasize the point that the main impacts are really going to be over in the Carolinas. So notice they are all covered in complete pink across the entire area. And then for the rest of the region, we're kind of out in the outskirts of this low pressure system. So that's why across our area, it kind of skims the eastern portion of our entire state. And that includes portions of central Georgia as well. So overall, what you need to know with these warnings and advisories is that the areas that are under the warning are a little bit more certain to see some sort of accumulation from snowfall through the day to day. By accumulation, I mean that these are where the heavier totals are going to end up being. So we're talking about county-wide snowfall totals that could be between 1 to 3 inches. Now there is a slight exception to this rule, which I'll touch on here in just a minute. Locally, there could be some areas that receive heavier amounts than that. But overall, we're talking on a county-wide basis. These are the snowfall totals that are kind of forecasted over in that area. So at the lowest amount, we're talking about up to around an inch. In the highest amount, we're talking about up to around 3 inches in those counties. Accumulation, again, is expected the farther east that you are. Now, of course, we still have some areas that are in an advisory. So the step down from a warning to an advisory really has more to do with forecasted totals. So that was between an inch to 3 inches over in the pink areas. The purple areas are expected to see some type of accumulation, but overall that accumulation is forecasted to be a little bit lower. So in the highest amounts here in the counties that are outlined in purple, we're talking about up to an inch in the heaviest spots. So this is the same thing, but kind of in other words almost. If we're talking about those counties that are in the pink, again, seeing between an inch to 3 inches, and by up to an inch in the purple areas, I mean right around trace amounts to up to an inch. So it could be less than an inch, but at the highest amounts, it could be up to an inch. Now there's a few counties, obviously, that are not outlined in any sort of winter weather alerts from the National Weather Service. That would be Taylor, Macon, Dooley, Crisp, and Wilcox counties. They potentially could see a flurry or two, but overall these counties are not expected to have snowfall accumulation. So the accumulation is going to stay confined to those counties that are included in the warning and in the advisory from the National Weather Service. Again, this is the same thing, just in another graphic. This is straight from the National Weather Service. It's kind of just highlighting the same thing. Obviously, the totals will be a little bit higher towards the north and the east, and then a little bit lower the further west that you track. Now, I mentioned a slight exception to that 1 to 3 inch range. What I want to mention to you is something that we'll have to be paying attention to as we go throughout the rest of the morning and as snowfall actually moves into our area. So obviously winds right now are a big part of our story, but I want to talk a little bit about the winds and the directions that they're coming from. So Alex did touch on this just a minute ago, but you can see we have some flow that's coming in from the east and we have some flow that's coming in from the northwest. So we have these two different opposing wind directions that kind of meet right here in our area. Now, right now, that's not necessarily causing any sort of major impact, but once we start to have snowfall in our area, it will be really important to pay attention to the area where these two winds converge. So right where you can see kind of along counties like Lawrence, Wilkinson, Baldwin, and Putnam counties, that's kind of where the winds are converging at the moment. Now this may change as we go throughout the rest of the morning, but wherever that line ends up being is going to be really important to pay attention to because these winds are converging, meaning they're coming from two directions and meeting at this point. Where these winds converge could have a great deal to do with where the snowfall ends up being the heaviest. So I mentioned a slight exception in that 1 inch to 3 inch rule. That exception could be along this line of wind convergence, because along this line, totals in terms of snowfall could be just a little bit heavier than the highest forecasted amounts. But very locally, this could be a difference between, you getting a lot of snow and your neighbor not getting a lot of snow. So we'll have to pay attention to this kind of convergence line as we go throughout the rest of the morning. Again, it could move and shift along with that low pressure system as it tracks closer to our area. But the general thinking is we need to pay attention to where these winds converge, because it's going to support a little bit higher snowfall totals along that convergence line. So a little bit of technical information for you there, but that is something that we'll be watching through the rest of the morning. Again, we'll see how it changes, and we are just kind of playing the waiting game until we actually end up seeing some snowfall here in our area. But of course, snowfall is not the only story. We talked a little bit about how cold temperatures are going to be, and temperatures are actually going to be frigid. So we are in not only the winter weather advisory and the winter storm warning, but we are also in an extreme cold warning. In fact, most of the southeast is, and that includes our entire area. So this takes effect later this afternoon and evening and goes all the way into Sunday afternoon. The reason that we are in this is because the wind chill values tonight and tomorrow will be down in the single digits and near 0 degrees for the entire area. So as this snowfall kind of rolls into our area here, it is really going to increase the winds. Again, there's just a sharp gradient, and that is increasing the winds a good bit. You can see as we start to have more flow coming in from, again, the northwest, that is when these winds are really going to start to pick up. So across our area, that means we have wind gusts in excess of 35 miles an hour at times. And this starts this afternoon. So potentially as snow is falling, we could already be seeing these winds start to gust that high. That's important for two reasons. One, of course, it's going to make the temperatures feel a lot colder. But two, if there is snow falling and you're getting wind gusts up to around 30 miles an hour at times, that is going to make visibility a little bit difficult as we go into this afternoon. So obviously where snow is accumulating, that's going to make road conditions hazardous in and of itself. But when you add in the fact that there may be decreased visibility as well, that is going to be something to factor in also. So overall, it's best just to avoid being on the roadways today, especially in those areas that are in the warning, because visibility could be decreased. And of course, as we have more accumulating amounts of snowfall, that is going to make it a little bit more difficult to drive. I would say that's mainly for the areas that are in the warning, but it should still be something we pay attention to for the whole area through the day. And the winds don't really die down much as we head into the late night and overnight hours. By late night tonight, we still have those really strong wind gusts over 30 miles an hour. And then by early Sunday morning, we still have wind gusts up to 25 miles an hour. So even through Sunday, yes, slightly lower than what we'll experience today, but still enough to play a role on the feels like temperatures, which is why we are under that cold weather warning, extreme cold warning. We have so many different cold and snowfall things. I keep forgetting the names, but that is an extreme cold warning. So you can see already by this afternoon, our temperatures will be somewhere in the 20s, feeling more like the teens. And then as we head into the late night and overnight hours tonight, that is when the temperatures are going to be starting to feel like the single digits. And that is all the way into early Sunday morning. So as you start your Sunday, waking up, maybe you have plans to head to church on Sunday morning. Again, we are still going to feel like the single digits as you kick off your Sunday. So extremely, extremely cold kicking off Sunday. That is going to be a pretty big impact to you heading out the door. Any sort of bundling up throughout the day is not overkill. You are definitely going to want to make sure that you have lots of layers on heading out the door on Sunday morning. By Sunday afternoon, temperatures will be above freezing, but the feels like numbers will not. So we will still feel like we're below freezing through the entire day on Sunday, and then heading into Monday morning, those winds will start to die down. Now, something that I hear a lot about feels like temperatures and, wind chill and things like that is a question about how feels like numbers impacts actual freezing temperatures. So remember, by Sunday afternoon, we're above freezing. That's going to be important because we want any remaining snowfall to have the opportunity to melt away. Of course, we want our temperatures to be above freezing so people can get their pipes a little bit warmer. They can warm up their homes, things like that. I get a question a lot, will my pipes still freeze over if the feels like number is below freezing, but the air temperature is above freezing, and the answer is no. You have to have an actual air temperature below freezing to actually have impacts from freezing temperatures, not just a feels like number. So yes, it will feel like it's below freezing, but luckily that should actually not cause an impact in terms of actual freezing, if that makes sense. So we should still be in the clear to be above freezing by Sunday afternoon. It will just still feel very, very cold. So as we head into the next hour or so, again, we are watching for those light flurries to begin to make their way into our area. If you are familiar with any of our snow coverage here on 13 WMAZ, you may be familiar with this reports map, something that we compile with the general public. If you happen to have snowfall in your area and you want to send us a report of how much snowfall that you have, you can do that, and then we can make plots here on this map based on how much snow you guys are telling us you have at your houses. So all you have to do is stick a ruler in the snow that you have in your area, snap a picture of that ruler, and then you can send it into our newsroom, or you can send it to our 13 WMAZ weather network, and we can start to compile this list with any sort of snowfall reports that we have across the area. Again, with snow, these kind of things, it just is really helpful to have information from the public, because it's not necessarily information that we can see as well just from looking at the satellite and radar. So with that, that is kind of the latest information that we have through the rest, again, of today and then through Sunday as well. We will continue to bring you updates every hour on the hour, starting with an extended version of our 13 WMAZ weekend morning news at 9. It's going to start at 8 today instead of 9, and then we are going to go the full 2 hours through 10 a.m. Then, again, we continue to have updates every hour on the hour. Me and meteorologist Alex Pry will both be live at 10 a.m., 11, noon, 1, and 2, and then so on throughout the rest of the day. So if you're looking for information, you can join us right here on 13 WMAZ Plus, and we will continue to bring the latest all morning long. We'll see you coming up here in just over 30 minutes.